The honourable member for Hamilton East Stony Creek.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise today to speak to Bill C-525. And earlier in question period today, the Minister of Labour made a statement that I wouldn't mind having attributed to myself. She called the member for Rosemont-La Petite-Patrie the MP for Cup W. Well, where I come from, you stand up for all the people in your community, whether they happen to be in Cup W or any other union, and I want to commend that member for the good work he's doing. I'm reminded when I look at this.
Member for Wetaskiwin is rising on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, I was present during question period today, as was most of the members in this House. I do not remember the Minister of Labour getting up once to answer a question. He may wish to correct the record.
Well, I don't really think that was a point of order. It's a matter of debate. It's a matter of the facts of a previous part of the day's proceedings. The honourable member for Hamilton East Stony Creek.
I do stand corrected. It was the former Minister of Labour, now the Minister of Transport, and thank you for pointing that out to me. I'm reminded when I look at this bill of a saying, in fact, it's part of an old Labour song, Solidarity Forever, that nothing is weaker than the feeble strength of one. And that's one of the reasons that in the 40s in Canada we started down the road to unionization. And the good veterans that we had in this place today, probably many of their fathers were part of that union movement when they came home from the war, and they didn't like the balance or imbalance to labor relations in this country. I myself, to be clear on the record many times in this place, I was the president of a communication workers local for Bell Canada for a number of years. I was president of the Hamilton District Labour Council. Very proud to serve in those positions. For the record as well, those were non-paid positions, and some people in this place like to refer to labour unions in a variety of disparaging ways, but I want to be clear here tonight about this bill, Mr. Speaker, C-525. It's nothing less than a backdoor attempt to weaken those organizations that protect workers every day in the workplace, their labour union. 525 would do so by fundamentally changing the processes for certifying or decertifying a union under federal jurisdiction. I believe, Mr. Speaker, 525 was designed for the sole purpose of bringing union organizing for workers in the federal jurisdiction to a complete halt. Now, this is nothing short than a very sly way to create a situation that this government hopes, this Conservative government hopes, would lead to a drastic increase in decertification of unions. They hope to succeed by bringing about low turnout of members, and just as voter suppression has been taking place in the federal voting, they plan on dealing with that same issue in the same manner of allowing fewer people to decertify a union. Decades, 70 years of business, government, labor unions work together. It's gone into those processes that we have today. And this government tends to leave out the fact that when it has a backbencher put forward such a bill, that it's adding to their own efforts. Another bill in this House, C-377 before. You know, between the two, the goal is obvious, to set back labour relations in Canada to the bad old days of the 1940s. Hamilton was one of those places in Canada where workers banded together, former veterans and workers banded together to get union representation. It was Justice Rand, in his wisdom in 1946, who said that if you were part of a union, you didn't have to join it, but you had to pay for the free collective bargaining, which wasn't so free. You had to contribute to your union dues. And again, you didn't have to be a member, but you were sharing the cost. Mr. Speaker, where are the consultations, the due diligence required for such a change? With C-525, it simply hasn't happened. It was crafted without any consultation with the key stakeholders from either the union side or the employer side. I believe it's irresponsible on the part of this Conservative government to allow for the amending of Canada's labour relations legislation by a private member's bill. If there were any case at all for changes to our labor relations legislation, then there must be consultations with all the stakeholders and a full study before proceeding to drafting any such bill. It should absolutely be done by a government bill, not a private member's bill. These changes, as set out in Bill C-525, would weaken workers' ability to seek union representation for collective bargaining, as well as advocacy on their behalf when disputes arise with their employers. This bill would increase the number of membership cards needed to trigger a union certification or decertification. It eliminates the option to form a union through majority card check, which opens the door to leaving workers vulnerable to intimidation by employers, or worse, those third parties hired. And I've stood before those third parties before. I've been on picket lines many times where the third parties were hired were standing on the other side of the picket line with a baseball bat in their hands. I'm not sure, but I hope the member proposing this change simply doesn't understand or appreciate the risks that some workers face. It's their fundamental right to withdraw their services after a due vote, and when they do so, they shouldn't be put at risk. Now, currently a union is certified if a majority of workers vote in favor of forming a union. Under the new rules, a majority of the entire bargaining unit, not just those who turn out for the vote, must vote in favor of forming a union. Non-unions are essentially counted under this new proposal as voting against the union simply if they're not in attendance. Under the decertification process in C-525, the new rules will require a majority of the membership to vote in favor of continuing representation to prevent a decertification. In other words, it makes it almost automatic if you don't have participation. If you look at the voting patterns in our elections and how low the voting patterns are there, how many people, if you had rules applied like that to MPs, would wind up not sitting in these seats because the assumption was going against them being elected? It's the same thing. For workers covered by the Public Service Labor Relations Act, the bill will require 55% of members to vote for continued representation to prevent decertification. You know, stacking the cards against people's rights. It is their right to make this determination. As I indicated earlier, Mr. Speaker, Bill C-525 throws open Canada's Labour Code through the back door. It forgoes the dialogue and the consultative processes developed over 70 years that have made changing labour legislation a progressive practice, where the rights of workers are always a major aspect involved in any discussion with employers and workers. It is clear to even a casual observer that this private member's bill is gerrymandered for union busting. It makes it nearly impossible for Canadian workers in the federal jurisdiction to form a union. Like Bill C-377 last year, the Conservative government is using the back door, private members' bill, to open the Labour Code instead of admitting that it is simply a Trojan horse piece of government legislation. It is the government, if the government truly feels that legislative change is necessary, and that's a possibility, the Minister of Labour should bring it before the stakeholders in the business and labour community to consult and then do the due diligence of a study before drafting changes to our Labour Relations Act. Failing that, the government needs to understand the opposition now sees through this bill for what it truly is, and soon all Canadians will understand it is yet another example of the Conservatives' agenda to drive down wages of the middle class and make Canadian workers work for less. C-525 is reckless. It's a radical piece of legislation taken straight from the Republican playbook of the United States. Contrary to the rhetoric of the extreme political right, attacks on collective bargaining do not promote economic growth. Rather, they drive income inequality. They create toxic work environments that turn Canadians against each other. Organized workers in Canada have delivered results: better wages, more rights for workers, a more secure future, not just for union members, but for all Canadians. One of the sayings within the union movement, there's a bumper sticker. It says, unions, the people that brought you the weekend. That's a little bit light for this occasion, but it's a fact. If it weren't for unions in this country, people would be working 6 days a week, 12 hours a day for next to nothing. Now, we have some people that work very hard in our country, and they happen to be members of the union. They happen to be people that are proud of the work that they do, and I'm proud of them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.